The dawn crept over Hollow Creek like a slow sigh. Soft light spilling across snow-blanketed streets and the brittle skeletons of forgotten fences. The world was quiet here, but beneath the stillness, a whispered sorrow clung to the cold air. Elara Finch stood at the edge of the town's wooden boardwalk, her breath a fragile mist against the gray morning. Her hands trembled, not from the chill that bit at her fingertips, but from a grief too heavy to cradle. Her arms, once full with the warmth of new life, now hung empty. Shadows of the child she had lost to a debt darker than the winter itself. The townsfolk moved past her like ghosts. Eyes averted, whispers sharp as icicles. They saw not a mother, but a symbol of failure and shame. Elara's heart, raw and bleeding, beat beneath layers of wool and sorrow. Each pulse a quiet rebellion against the cold judgment that wrapped itself tighter than any frost. She recalled the night Rowan had been taken, the soft cries swallowed by the merciless wind as Silas Dreger. The town's lender and tormentor claimed the child as his due. The world had turned cruel and unforgiving, and Elara had been left to wander its frozen edges alone. Her footsteps faltered on the rough planks as the scent of burning cedar drifted from the porches nearby, mingling with the bitter tang of smoke and whispered gossip. Martha Whistler, the sharp-eyed storekeeper, had already begun her daily ritual of murmurs and pointed looks. Poor thing, they said, caught in debts she never understood. The cruel comfort of repetition echoed through Hollow Creek, a town where mercy was scarce and survival was measured in silence. Deputy Harlan Pike avoided her gaze, unwilling to intervene in troubles that were not his own, in the isolation of her small cabin. Elara tended to the remnants of her life with quiet grace. She mended torn gloves by the flicker of a dying hearth, traded handmade quilts for scraps of bread, and whispered lullabies to the emptiness where her son's breath once warmed her. Outside, the winter storm raged, but inside, she cultivated a fragile hope, a soft ember beneath layers of ice. The cold had shaped her into something unyielding, a woman forged by loss and tempered by resilience. Rumors drifted down from the ridges that framed the town. Tales of a man who lived among the crags and snowdrifts a shadow wrapped in fur and silence. They called him Branna K, the mountain man whose past was etched in scars and whose presence was as mysterious as the winter's night. His name was spoken cautiously, a thread of possibility weaving through the fabric of Elara's loneliness. Some said he could track anything, survive any storm, and bear the weight of 1,000 regrets without bending. One morning, as the pale sun spilled its timid light over Hollow Creek, Elara struggled to carry a stack of firewood across the uneven ground. Her breath came in short bursts, frost clinging to her lashes. Without a word, a figure approached, the heavy thud of horses' hooves muffled by snow. Brannock Hale, tall and weathered, his coat dusted with frost, lifted the burden from her arms and walked it to her doorstep. Their eyes met briefly, quiet understanding passed between them. Fragile as the first thaw of spring days folded into one another like the pages of an unfinished story. Brannock's presence was a gentle constant, marked by small acts rather than grand gestures. He repaired the barn's broken hinge, returned a lost scrap of quilt, and left firewood stacked by her door. Elara found herself watching the mountain man with a mixture of curiosity and something softer. An unspoken bond growing in the shared silence. When she tried to thank him, his voice was low and steady. "Winter's kinder when we don't face it alone," he said, and she carried the words like a talisman. Yet, beneath the fragile warmth, the cold grip of Silas Dreger tightened. He mocked Elara's efforts in the saloon, his laughter like the crack of a whip. He flaunted the stolen child as a prize, a cruel reminder of her powerlessness. The town watched, some with pity, most with disdain, their silence complicit in her suffering. Brannock, observing from the shadows, felt the stirrings of a promise of reckoning that must come before the thaw. On a night when the wind howled like a living thing, Brannick slipped quietly to the bar, his gaze seeking out the bartender's knowing eyes. "Where does Silas keep the child?" he asked, his voice a rough whisper carrying the weight of a mountain winter. The answer came slowly, the first step toward a dawn neither Elara nor Brannock could yet see. In the deep hush of Hollow Creek's longest night, a quiet resolve was born. Fragile but fierce like the flicker of a single candle against the endless dark, the snow continued to fall, soft and relentless, burying footprints and fears alike. But beneath the frozen earth, something stirred a promise that even the coldest winter could not quell. And so, with hands clenched against the chill and hearts burdened yet unbroken, Elara and Brannock prepared to face the dawn, when the shadows would finally yield to light. The cold that clung to Hollow Creek was a quiet thing, but in Brannock Hale's chest, a fiercer winter brewed. His past was a landscape carved by loss's son buried beneath a landslide years ago. A grief frozen in time like the glaciers of Cinder Peak Ridge. Now, as he watched Elara Finch from the shadows, her hollowed eyes and clenched jaw whispered the same sorrow. She carried her pain with a fragile dignity, one that stirred something long buried in him, a chance for redemption in a world that had offered little kindness. Under the heavy shroud of night, Brannock studied Silas Drager's movements with the patience of the mountains themselves. No boastful threats or reckless confrontation, only quiet observation and steady planning. He traced the lender's footsteps through Hollow Creek's icy veins, memorizing the creak of floorboards, the flicker of lantern light, the patterns of guards whose hearts were as cold as the snow outside. Elara, meanwhile, wrestled with her own fear and guilt. She knew involving Brannock meant stirring a storm that could consume them both. Yet beneath her silence bloomed a fragile hope, a thread pulling her toward an uncertain dawn. Silas was a man intoxicated by power, his cruelty sharpened by the cold winter wind. When he found Elara gathering scraps of wood near the saloon, he jeered, his voice cutting through the chatter like a jagged blade. "Still clinging to scraps, Finch? Your son's no longer yours to cradle." The townsfolk circled, their eyes flickering between the lender's smirk and Elara's trembling form. For the first time, she found strength in her voice, shaky but resolute. "You may have taken him, Silas, but you will never own my heart." Brannock stood nearby, his presence a steady anchor, his eyes dark pools of quiet fire. The crowd shifted, moved by something unspoken, but fear held their tongues captive. When dawn broke, it came as a pale blue promise. Snow drifted lazily in the cold light, each flake a whispered prayer. Brannock moved like a shadow among shadows, silent and deliberate. The lender's homestead stood at the edge of town, a fortress of wood and suspicion. Inside, Rowan slept in a cradle worn by cold hands, innocence untouched by the debts that bound him. Brannock's breath caught, memories flooding like a thawed river. Silas appeared suddenly, his eyes glittering with menace. Words hung heavy in the frosted air, accusations and defiance mingling like smoke. Brannock did not reach for his gun. Instead, his voice was a low rumble, steady as the mountains. "A man who claims a child for debt is bankrupt in soul." Silas lunged, desperate and wild. But Brannock's restraint was a tether, a silent command that echoed louder than any gunshot. No blood was spilled, only the weight of truth breaking through hardened hearts. Cradling Rowan in his arms, Brannock turned toward the waiting dawn. Each hoofbeat a step away from shadow toward light. The town stirred with a breath held too long. Faces pressed to frost-lined windows, eyes wide with disbelief and shame. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers lowered their gazes. Hollow Creek's cold judgment thawed in the glow of a stolen hope returned. Some stepped back, their silence heavy with regret for watching pain without offering aid. Elara, wrapped in the warmth of her son's breath, stood taller than ever before, a woman, reborn in dignity. Her knees touched the frozen earth as Brannock set Rowan gently in her arms. The baby's skin was soft, a fragile promise against the harsh winter. Elara's fingers traced the curve of his cheek as if afraid to believe. Brannock looked away, the weight of his own loss etched in the lines of his face. She whispered, voice thick with wonder and relief, "You brought him home when no one else dared." Their hands brushed, a warmth spreading through the cold, a silent communion of shared scars and newfound hope. Whispers of apology fluttered through the town, awkward and sincere. Hollow Creek began to shed its bitter frost, one hesitant step at a time. Brannock moved quietly among its people, repairing fences, mending broken tools, stitching the fabric of a community frayed by hardship. Elara watched, the seed of trust growing where fear once ruled. Together, they were weaving a new story, one not of debts and loss, but of resilience and gentle grace. As the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the snow in shades of amber and rose, Elara brought fresh bread to Brannock's door. No words were exchanged, only a long, steady look that spoke of things too deep for speech. She placed Rowan in his arms, the baby stirring with a soft sigh. Brannock held him with a tenderness born of past heartbreak, a silent vow whispered between winter's breath. It was not love declared in flames, but a quiet fire kindled in shared solitude. Beginning neither had expected, but both needed, and so the night closed around Hollow Creek. No longer just a town marked by loss, but a place where hope took root beneath winter's frozen sky. For in the quietest moments, when the world seemed stillest, there bloomed a truth as enduring as the mountains. Even in the coldest season, hearts could thaw, and light would find its way home. Remember, wanderer, that life's fiercest storms are tempered by the smallest acts of kindness, and the deepest wounds can heal in the warmth of shared courage. Hold fast to hope, for dawn always follows the longest night. If this story settled like a slow fire in your soul, whisper your promise to return. Subscribe and let Wild West Tales carry you through the cold, the shadows, and into the light once more.